So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the February webinar for the MERLIN project. Today we're going to talk about upscaling ecosystem restoration, nature-based solutions. Tom Buijse of Deltares in Wageningen. Tom has been working for decades in restoration of inland waters of major rivers like the Rhine and the Volga, and is going to discuss work within this project. Tom, thank you very much for joining us, and we will run about 30 minutes or maybe a little more. There's time for questions. I'll be monitoring the questions. Please type your questions in the chat so I can call you in turn. Tom, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I will first try to share my screen. Can you give me a sign whether that's working?
It's working fine, we see it.
Okay, thank you, Jörg. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for this invitation. I would like to share the approach we have applied in the MERLIN project, where 17 case studies have prepared plans to upscale freshwater ecosystem restoration. The presentation is the result of almost all partners within the MERLIN project, but have been coordinated by Maria and Kaisa van Suke in Finland and Alice and me from Deltares. Actually, this is the second time that the upscaling is presented. The initial results were presented already in almost 2 years ago in April 2023. But now today I will give you the complete story of the upscaling approach which has been applied in MERLIN. For you, the participants to the seminar, I expect not a new message, but it's good to emphasize that what happens in our inland freshwater systems is often quite invisible. And this is also unfortunately reflected in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Where are the freshwater ecosystems? They are not what you would expect in the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is life below water, but that only covers the marine ecosystems. Actually, they are covered in number 6, clean water and sanitation, and unexpectedly in 15, life on land. So you have to look for fresh water, quite invisible. And so I consider there's a constant need to raise awareness among the wider audience for the status of our inland freshwater ecosystems and how they are affected, how they should be conserved, and how they can be improved. This is the roadmap we developed along the way in the MERLIN project to draft the plans for upscaling freshwater ecosystem restoration. It consists of combining different tools, which will I explain now step by step. We first started with that all the case studies performed an IUCN self-assessment for nature-based solutions. And that gave insight into the status of the implementation process. On the other hand, we used the European Green Deal goals, which is a wide set of goals to identify the potential impact of the case studies. All the case studies performed a SWOT analysis on their own case study. The partners did them themselves, and based on that, they drafted an optimization strategy, which was the first deliverable in this course, which was ready just over 2 years ago. Based on this optimization strategy, which gave a reflection of where they are now and where they could head to in the future, the case studies themselves prepared interim regional scalability plans. Due to the short time scale between the optimization strategy and these interim plans, there was no time for a proper review and there was no time for consultation with external stakeholders. But in the end, it was much better that they first prepared those plans, because that formed a basis which they could then in the second part have an external stakeholder interaction, and within Merlin we reviewed all the the draft plans. Subsequently, the plans were revised by the case study partners and synthesized in a final deliverable, which resulted in the final plans, which I will present today. The first step was using the IUCN tool for self-assessment of nature-based solutions. With regard to nature-based solutions, we see that it's very often necessary to emphasize that they aim to serve multiple purposes, both for people and nature, and not exclusively a solution for nature. The IUCN self-assessment tool consists of 8 criteria. I will not go into detail today. The explanation of the criteria can be found in the guidelines on the IUCN website. But here you can see that they cover multiple perspectives. What are the challenges? Is there appropriate scale for restoration chosen? Is it feasible and inclusive? And can it be adapted when the context or conditions are changing? The assessment gives insight into the aspects that have been addressed and those that require attention by the score that you see on the right side, which is just an example of one of the case studies. The assessment consists of 28 detailed questions, which each can be scored separately. I'm not going to read them out. The presentation will be shared later by you if you like, and it can be viewed back on the IUCN website. The Green Deal of the EU is the European way to implement the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The essence is that it's not only about biodiversity, it's about climate, zero pollution, inclusivity, sustainable food production, etc. These set of goals are thus much broader than the traditional aims for freshwater ecosystem restoration. And for this, Merlin focuses on restoring the biodiversity and the services of freshwater-related ecosystems. All Merlin case studies have analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of their case study and the external opportunities and threats. The external context has been assessed for socio-economical, environmental, and policy aspects. This SWOT analysis has been done on the one hand against the IUCN self-assessment criteria and the EU Green Deal indicators. This SWOT analysis delivered the ingredients for the case study to prepare an optimization strategy and proved to be very insightful. It gave a deeper understanding on multiple goals, on multiple stakeholder process, on technical knowledge gaps, on economic opportunities, and on policy opportunities and limitations. The exercise broadened the perspective of the core group involved in the restoration activities and gave reasons to broaden the theme and also the narrative for the case studies. And it guides the partners, the case study partners, to widen their knowledge and view on their case studies. So the optimization strategies then served as a basis to start the upscaling trajectory for each case study. For this, we made use of this management framework, scaling up from vision to large-scale change. It consists of 3 steps with a logical sequence of tasks to be performed. Each case study received a template with the following category of questions. Whom should be targeted by those plans? Why should plans be scaled up? Where should it be scaled up? And then what is being scaled up? And then how and who scales up? And in the end, the 17 plans from the Merlin plans offer visions for upscaling restoration in a wider landscape with a time horizon up to 2050. To create it through collaborative efforts with a wider group of stakeholders to upscale freshwater restoration. And the plans help to mainstream nature-based solution thinking and the interaction with a wider group of stakeholders. Just to catch up, MERLIN has 3 clusters of case studies covering a diversity of freshwater ecosystems in Europe. One cluster deals with case studies in peatlands and wetlands. The second are situated in small streams and basins, and the third in large transboundary rivers. Based on the interim plans, it became clear that knowing the start of each case study was needed. We thus asked each case study to assess this based on the steps and tasks for upscaling. For each task, we indicate whether it's ready, whether it's advanced or concrete ideas, whether there are only first vague or these or generic thoughts, whether there's no idea yet, or whether it's not relevant for a case study. And you can see on the right side where the case studies are structured in vertical columns, that they differ by colors and they differ in the status where they were. But you also see that all the questions are considered relevant and a task relevant for each of the case studies. So we conclude that the starting point for developing an ambitious and feasible regional scalability plan requires insight into current approaches for restoring freshwater ecosystem. And it also offered opportunities on top of that for case studies to contact each other and ask, hey, how are you doing this? And can we make use of your approach? A key aim of the upscaling plans was to consider a broader set of goals. All case studies have multiple goals ranging from 5 to 11. Biodiversity net gain, climate change regulation and inclusivity are the main EU Green Deal goals of the RSPs. Having a broader set of goals helps to engage a wider group of stakeholders and attract more and diverse financial sources. Now I will give several case study examples. The case studies were prior to the start of the MERLIN project selected based on flagship restoration activities. The case study from Denmark focuses on taking carbon-rich soils out of agriculture production. This case study has been presented in the previous webinar by Linda Utklit from the Danish Nature Agency. And I will just pick up the highlights, and if you would like to hear more, you can go to the MERLIN website and listen to her webinar. So what makes this agreement in Denmark unique? It was an agreement between public and private parties, the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, the Danish Society for Nature Conservation, Danish industry, to have an agreement on a green Denmark. It's considered a way to make Denmark a modern agricultural country and provides concrete answers to the agriculture, climate and nature challenges. It's an historical reorganization of the Danish land area to provide more space for nature and better conditions for biodiversity and drinking water production. And it will introduce a CO2 tax for emissions from livestock. And for this, the Danish government has set aside 30 billion Danish kroner, which is around 5 billion euros, to change the land use of approximately 140,000 hectares of carbon-rich lowland soils, but also start to plant forest on 250,000 hectares. So, and on the right side you see another image is not so good, but that's an indication where those carbon soils are situated in Denmark. The second example is the Dutch case study Room for the Rhine. This can be considered as an example of nature-based solutions before the term was actually being used. Instead of traditional flood protection with dike strengthening, Room for the Rivers was comprised of a diverse set of measures to serve multiple goals. flood risk reduction, and spatial quality improvement. From a legacy of this case study, you also see how long it takes, and therefore those plans are within MERLIN are developed for 3 decades. The reason for this room for the river were floods in 93 and 95. And after that, it took 10 years of planning and adaptation, and subsequently another 12 years, 13 years to realize 34 projects with a total cost of 2.3 billion euros. So in all, it took 25 years with that. So with the MERLIN plans up to 2050, we have a similar time horizon. But the challenges from 93 and 95 are not the same anymore as the challenges for 2025. Besides high water, we also now suffer quite often low water conditions. So that requires an even more integrated approach for a future-proof river system, where it's pleasantly to safe and pleasant to live and to work and recreate. So the new plans that are development at the moment are to reverse unfavorable development in the river area for flood protection, freshwater supply, nature, and navigation, and also to anticipate for approaching consequences of climate change with more frequent periods of extreme high and low water. So you see that the multiple aims are presented in this approach. The first case study I like to present is the Tisa in Hungary. Their upscaling plan proposes how to implement nature-based water retention measures, sustainable land use, and water efficiency along the entire stretch of the Tisa in Hungary. The agricultural sector has been affected in recent years by droughts, and as a consequence became more aware of the impacts. The plan should thus also serve as a climate resilient economy and social development. The key to which is water retention, reconnecting floodplains to the river, and land use that leaves sufficient space to retain water. The initiative for this case study came from the NGOs. It was really bottom-up initiative, and now they try to gain a wider group of people. And what you see in the illustration on the right side is the image both at low water and high water conditions, how that should work. The fourth and final one I would like to show you is the Blue Belt case study from Germany, a new perspective for inland waterways. Each case study within MERLIN has its peculiar flagship features. The Blue Belt program for federal waterways in Germany is the most large-scale of all MERLIN case studies. But at the same time, it's not fully financed. It has to be realized through individual initiated projects. But it serves as a model for waterway restoration and sustainable development. It covers 7,000 kilometers federal waterways, and it aims to improve both ecological and societal well-being while maintaining navigation. So a biotope network and floodplain restoration, maintain navigability, but also promote water-based tourism and recreation, and being adaptive to climate change. And as you can see by the long list of stakeholders in the advisory board, they try to have input from all different directions. In total, 17 plans have been prepared, and all the plans can be downloaded from the MERLIN website. And on top of that, the essence of this plan has been put in a synthesis document, which is also available from the MERLIN website. So now for you, the take-home messages. we have taken from this preparation, from this process of drafting these plans. What is good, I think, is that each plan had both an implementation partner and a scientific partner at the basis. So the why question is that we need to mainstream nature-based solution into policies and practice. It does not have to be always nature-based solution, but the thinking has to widen that nature-based solutions are considered, because they are aimed to serve multiple goals, both for people and nature. And within MERLIN, we did that by targeting the EU Green Deal ambitions. Where should those plans? We have to. The thinking should be on a larger scale. It says based on wide perspective, which is for smaller basins appropriate, but as you've seen for the large rivers, it can be long stretches, 50 to 100 kilometers or even longer. And also that the challenges, and that's in particular also with the small stream basins, but also with the peatlands and wetlands, that the challenges are not only in the water bodies, but in the wider catchment. And then in the terms of nature-based solutions that are being considered, it should be replication and expansion of current good practices, perhaps not yet in the case studies, but also in case studies elsewhere, but also to develop projects which are inclusive with multiple benefits for nature, climate, and society. Then the how question is definitely there has to be a long-term vision at the basis, and we ask the case studies to do that with a high horizon of 3 decades. But that should be followed by a stepwise implementation strategy after that. But it also requires transformative change in different areas, on the ground with practical field in the work. It could be considered with changes in policy, but also looking for, well, which opportunities are there already within the existing policies to make use of it, and efforts to involve the public. And then who? It cannot be an NGO alone. It cannot be a governmental organization alone. It has to be collaborative and collective with a diverse set of actors. And for this, depending also, new coalitions have to be built. But there are also within the, as well with the Danish example, with our other cases, there are also existing networks already there, which simply could be strengthened in a way. So now, conclusions and recommendations, we see after having done this process, despite of political and economic turmoil, and with that we refer to the COVID pandemic, and after that also the war in Ukraine, it's still possible to develop ambition restoration goals. All the case studies have done that. It should make use of holistic and ambitious policy frameworks, and we feel that the EU Green Deal is that. It gives a good, it has really a good ambition. This helps to set and support the making targets. What I've shown with the example of the call-out of all the individual case studies, that scaling up requires a thorough understanding of local context and learning by doing and being adaptive. There's not one approach, but the stepwise approach works. And we also saw that visualization is key to convey the message of the plans. Next to working with stakeholders, freshwater restoration will benefit from more multidisciplinary teams at the basis, especially also to attract additional funding, private funding. But that attraction of private funding is, we find out, is really a challenge, as benefits of ecosystems and nature-based solutions remain insufficiently accounted for and recognized. And monitoring, mostly for most of you, probably nothing new, is crucial to understand the effectiveness of the measures and to gain support from policymakers and the wider public. And for that, also the plans should be explicit about the known uncertainties and boundary conditions, also to be able to adapt and to change plans as needed. And with that, Jan, I end my presentation, and all the information, the synthesis documents and the individual plans can be found on the MERLIN website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I must say, I think you've set a new standard for excellence in the clarity of your presentation, because I do not see a single question that's been posted. So in that event, if people will raise their hand,
Sharing. Okay.
I could take liberty as moderator to throw in a provocative question at the beginning. We have a New York Times has just published an analysis today to say that we expect 5 million people to be migrating within the United States for climate-related reasons over the near term, and in the next 25 years, more than 50 million people moving. Now, this is a combination of fire, flooding, and sea level rise. But I was wondering in this analysis if we have skyrocketing rates of insurance in the United States because of this, and in some cases, in entire sections of city, the insurance company has abandoned them. Is this factored into the economic analysis when we talk about nature-based solutions, that we have a very changing economic calculation as to where people should be living and working, and in some cases it's because they live in the floodplain?
Oh, that's not an easy one. I think people, when people start to anticipate what might happen, you have to see that you have to start to take things into account, which were previously not taken into account. And I think I'm working at Deltares, which is an integral institute. Also, my colleagues around me are dealing with flood protection. So in that area and with sea level rise, that thinking, adaptive thinking, is already there. With nature restoration, in my opinion, that thinking was much less there in the past. And so by having this multiple goal approach, what we applied within MERLIN, you see that those questions from other goals, they come into the picture, and that widens the scope of thinking. But the issue as such as that you address has not been so specifically included in the analysis. But in the case studies for the Rhine, it's very clear that the motivation is flood protection. And but those, I don't know whether it completely answers your question, but
it's a huge question. I did it off the cuff. We do have a question that just appeared from Lawrence Carvalho. What were the most important learning points from developing the upscaling plans? Are there any aspects you'd change or do more of in the methodology?
Thank you, Lawrence. I think a learning point was that the road, how to develop these, was not clear at the beginning of the project. So, and a learning point also is that the instruments to do so are there already, but the learning point was that we combined them in a way throughout the course of the project. And then we asked the case studies individually, and many were they all had their different answers in a way, but what they learned, and that's also where they were. What I showed in the face of already upscaling thinking, but even for the most advanced ones, this they noticed that they sometimes forget certain steps in the process, which are for where you have a public organization who is doing everything, not including enough stakeholders, where the NGOs are doing just the opposite, and they know they have to organize themselves with stakeholders. So yeah, I would say that would be more or less the essence. And then there's so much information in all the individual plans, and that I think also by having this diversity of case studies in different clusters, people who are not in the Merlin project could look for the plans who are most connected to their own situation to make use of that.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Okay, we have Agata Klimkowska just commented to say it's a good point to include climate adaptation risks. And Joshua Reut of the Nature Conservancy said, Tom, thank you for this nicely designed PowerPoint. How do you think EU member states can best develop nature restoration plans in a short amount of time, given your team's great suggestion that this is best done with broad partnerships, multi-sector, and our hopes for larger geographies?
I think we will put it on paper, Josh, what we are doing, and I think the road we have step by step was for us a more long and winding road to think, but that approach could definitely be done in a shorter time frame than what we've done now within the Merlin project to develop such plans. And it can start with a key group of interested parties, and they can initiate that and then involve a wider group of stakeholders. But what I didn't mention in the presentation, we also found out that conditions differ quite a bit per country. What is the political wind at the moment? And also, within Hungary, sorry to use that example, but the conditions are not at best at moment to do so. But then still drafting those plans and having them on the shelf, you have political elections every 4 years, and then it may shift, and then you could bring the plans forward with that you have been prepared. So I think the plans can be made. The initial these can be made in quite a shorter time frame.
We now have another comment from Agata Klimkowska. By the way, until the 7th of February, there are open public consultations regarding the template of restoration plans. In our opinion, the template is far too generic and abstract. I urge you to deliver the feedback before the deadline. It would be great to see what are your observations. We call for more well-developed manuals and approaches. Do you have any comment to that, Tom?
I think this is a signal to everybody who is attending this seminar at this moment from Agatha. I didn't have a look at but the Merlin project absolutely pays attention to the process of the restoration plan. So I don't know whether Sebastian, who's also in the if he's still in the meeting, whether he could reply to that. But I like to add one nature restoration law. It's about the Green Deal. And we feel that what I try to emphasize in the presentation, that for upscaling, we have to think both about people and nature, not only about nature in a way to bring things can really get bigger if you think in terms of multiple goals, also with other sources of finances.
So we have a comment coming in from Ellis Penning of Deltares. He said, Joshua Reut, we might also see that by including a wider group of stakeholders, we may see additional opportunities for nature restoration efforts, especially when we take a more nature-based solutions approach to the dialogue. How to prevent floods or droughts facilitates new dialogues on how nature-based solutions can be used for that. So the multiple goals as a starting point for the dialogue. I don't know if you want to comment further on that, Tom.
I think Alice that's a kind support to what I've tried to convey during the presentation.
Well, I'm desperately clinging on here, but no more questions are coming in. I just see it as a very, very comprehensive and clear summary, and probably you've brought everyone up to the same point where we all understand each other. So maybe we can bring this to a close early, which would be unprecedented. So as I said, a new standard of excellence for clarity, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, we're done with pleasure.
Graag gedaan. Okay, Jörg, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, I have no information about the speaker of the next webinar because Astrid is doing that and she's not here today. But it will be on the 3rd of March, Monday. And as always, you can find the information as soon as possible on our website. So thanks again, Tom, for this nice presentation. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. And hope to see you in 4 weeks' time.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
have a good day and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.